Welcome everybody to the Waterfowl Management Podcast. I think we've got a really good topic tonight. We have already learned some things in sitting down and discussing. All of us went out and did some research in preparation for this topic, and we've been talking about plants and things that I've never heard of before. So it should be a pretty exciting episode. So before we get into that, Danny, you've been doing some cool stuff. Why don't you talk about some of your goings on?
Yeah, so I've got a grandson. He's a high school quarterback, and he's been wanting to go to the Manning Passing Academy. It's in Louisiana, Thibodaux, Louisiana. So we attended that camp, and it was the whole Manning family was there. Archie Jr., Archie Sr., Peyton, Eli, and Cooper. And besides Archie Jr., they've all been attending this camp and kind of emceeing the camp for 30 years. So it was the 30-year anniversary. It was an awesome experience. So any of you young quarterbacks out there, I strongly recommend it. And take a look at it. And so signups in August, and generally is when they kind of open up registration, I believe, about mid-August. So we just had a ball and learned a lot too.
Awesome.
What a cool opportunity. Not every day you get to go meet guys like that and go to a camp that they're present and willing to come out and talk to you and interact with you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Dad, what about you?
Well, the big excitement here is scallop season opens in our area tomorrow. And so we're all lining up to go scalloping and trying to decide who's going to get to the spot first and where all the scallops are going to be. And it'll be a little bit of a boat race, kind of somewhat like ducks and duck hunting on public land some days, I guess. But we're going to be chasing scallops tomorrow. So that's exciting. And anybody that has done it, you probably enjoy it. And if you haven't done it, you really ought to try it. It is really fun and can be entertaining and amazing how good those little things are. There's a lot of them. They're not very big, but they are good.
Yeah.
Definitely good.
That's awesome.
And
That's awesome.
other than that, it's super hot down here in Florida right now.
It's super hot in Missouri too, but the deer are starting to fill out. I saw a damn nice buck the other night, so I was pretty excited about that. He was well out past his ears. He still had some room to grow, but probably a deer that I should be looking at more for the fall. But
Good.
anyway, episode tonight, kind of the topic that we're going to try to go through is going to be the second pillar of what we're calling the five pillars of a perfect wetland, I guess you could say. And so again, as a refresher, the way we came up with these was brainstorming some of the best properties that we're aware of, whether that be private properties, public properties that consistently produce from the beginning of the season to the end into the spring and produce a lot of spring habitat and they're just more than a place to go shoot ducks. And so the very first one of those that we went through was controlling your water, which was the first episode last week. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely go give that one a listen. But the second one here today that we're going to talk about is food diversity. And this was one of the things that was almost most evident when you look at a lot of these good properties, because you look at a lot of good properties, they've all got water on them. And so, but the thing that you can pretty much pick out immediately is what's their food source and what is it that ducks are going there for. And so most of them aren't just one food source. And in fact, all the ones examples we were talking about were not just one food source. They were multiple food sources. I would liken this to an investment portfolio. You probably don't want to just own Apple, Amazon, and Meta. You probably want to own a bunch more than that to keep yourself protected and to fulfill all the needs that you've got. So that's going to be the conversation today is how do you achieve that on your property? What does that look like? And why would we even care about that at all? So Dad, why don't you talk about, how a duck's diet changes throughout the year and what that means and how that relates to food?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of a common theme that we've talked about in some of our other courses and different things. But I think there's a lot that you have to think about with food and what you're providing ducks and what time of year it is and the seasonality of that. And the ducks do routinely change foods, and a lot of that's for some very specific reasons, whether we know that or not. But I think one of the easy ways to think about why it's important for that diversity of foods and be able to provide as much diversity on your property as you can is that the needs of a duck change throughout the season. So when those birds are first leaving the nesting grounds coming south in the late summer, early fall, they're still in some early molting stages. And so they're going to be looking for protein-based foods in that case still to finish out that feather growth. And so they're going to be, utilizing seeds, but they're going to still be trying to get as many invertebrates and stuff high in protein like that as they can. And then as they progress, into the fall, they start getting into a whole different time period. So they're now more energy based foods are what they're looking for. And so they may start tending away from some of the invertebrate needs and stuff like that, looking for more of the higher energy, moist soil foods and hard, hot foods, if you want to call it, as it gets colder. And so, but all of that, basically what I'm saying is that as the seasons change and progress throughout that year, a duck's life cycle is also changing. He's going through different events at different times of the year, and we have to provide food that's going to help that bird meet all of those different life cycle changes throughout the season. And again, that'd be like fall migration, then they go into maybe pair bonding, wintering, spring migration, nesting. All of those are different life cycle events. They're going through a host of different things at those times, and there's different foods that help them meet those needs as they go.
Yeah, and a comment on that one, Michael. I think, the way that Kale's kind of talked about and introduced this, it's all about diversity, because these moist soil plants, and I'm gonna land on those first. They provide roots, seeds, tubers, and they also provide substrate for those invertebrates that are so important. So having a diverse base of food, including a large percentage in moist soil plants, provides a tremendous amount of nutrition. And it's something that you definitely need to have in your management plan for providing that diversity that the birds need through the fall, through pair bonding, through spring migration, because it provides such a wide variety of food and nutrition. So we talk about corn. Yeah, corn is great. High energy needs, highly digestible carbohydrates, just high energies. It has its place, but and it needs to be in the equation. Put it in the equation if you want to, because they will utilize it during cold periods when they need high energy. But that the moist soil plant, the diversity piece. If you're a wetland manager, if you're a landowner, if you're a duck hunter, it's great to promote that, because you're going to be promoting waterfowl production, as well as this wide variety of nutrition that's going to be very attractive to them during all periods of fall and spring and winter too.
Sure.
So, looking at that food diversity and thinking about all the different food sources that feed birds, one of the things that is most evident to me is that the more diverse your food, the more diverse the ducks that you have on it. Is that true? And what have you guys seen on that array?
I can open up on that one, and that is definitely, you're going to get the full spectrum. And it's about presenting that where you're providing that diversity, because a lot of these birds are looking for seeds, when they first get here. Some of the smaller ducks, especially. So if you have the panning grasses, the smartweed, the wild millet, the crabgrass, all these diverse types of plants that are moist soil plants, they're associated with wetlands. That's what those birds are looking for. And if you provide the right feeding depths, optimum feeding depths, which is 4 to 10 inches, really. I mean, you can push it to 12, but 4 to 10 inches is really the optimum early season, setting the table for these early migrants, pintails, teal, shovelers, gadwall, widgeon. That's what they're looking for. So you can take advantage of that life history period where these birds are looking for that. And I'll take Missouri, for instance. That's when they're going to show up and look for that type of food resource, and they're going to be in there. Then when mallards come, they love it too. So not only are you providing for the early migrants, but when the mallards start to show up, they're going to like it too. And it's going to be a very desirable and attractive area for the birds. It's very nutritious. So you can start out that way. And a lot of times, some of these early migrants push out. If we get a lot of heavy weather, they're going to push out. Mallards are going to stick around. They're still going to utilize that diverse system, because that food base, those seeds will last for several months and even into the spring. They're very resilient. They'll hang around. Not all of them, but some of them do. So that's another part of diversity, is that food resource lasts for quite some time. And depending on your topography and how you flood it, you can actually introduce more new food of this diverse type throughout the season. So it's a great way to start at the beginning of migration all the way through, and be able to hunt and observe birds that, different species all the way through. And I think you'll be much happier doing that than trying to focus in on just mallards.
Yeah, certainly that diversity is going to add a lot of opportunity to have a diverse group of birds on the property over time as well. I think it's as a manager, I think it's important that we kind of relate where we are in the world for the best management of our food resources as well. Folks that might be Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin, maybe even up in the prairie country, what they're providing in the late summer, early fall is going to be probably a little bit different than what a manager in Missouri or, maybe southern Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas kind of country, going to be looking at a little different food resources that you need to be focused on. So it would help, I think, in terms of putting yourself on the map. Where are you located? And what are you typically trying to do for the waterfowl when they're there? Are they there during the middle of the fall, the winter, spring? And that'll help you make some decisions on your best food sources to try to provide as well. But again, that comes into the seasonality of what we talked about right out of the gate. And that's that Mother Nature has naturally produced a lot of these foods historically over time, and that's why the birds have kind of followed the flyways the way they do. When they come south in the fall, some of the earliest birds that are still molting are hitting spots that are having some early water that's on the landscape. It's into fresh green vegetation, so it's starting to kick off some of that invertebrate response. And so you get a few birds that are trying to finish up the molt that naturally falls in place for them when they get there. That's also the same plants that are probably producing the seeds that the birds will kind of transition into. And then as the seasons progress, you're going to start looking at that colder time period where you're going to want not only hot foods, but like you talked about, Danny, the diversity of all the other seed sources. They all provide a huge amount of different things for birds, all the different nutrients that they're going to need, and all of them are a little different for sure, just like we as humans need diversity in our food as well. And so I think, yeah, there's a lot to how you manage that food resource and what you provide based on where you're at, what the birds are doing when they're on your property. And yeah, the more diverse that food source is, the better. As you get into the winter, things like the corn, the rice, the acorns, those kind of things become the things that help those birds really maintain that high energy level that they need for migrating and staying warm in those colder climates. And so just have to put it all in kind of retrospect with where you're at and what you need to be providing for those birds.
That's a great point, Michael, because we haven't really talked about, like the state of Mississippi. They do a lot of they flood a lot of timber, and I got a friend that's got some buddies down there, and they flood a bunch of timber, and so that's another resource that I'm hoping that at some point we can talk about that on an episode. We can have a podcast about bottomland hardwoods or just bottomland forest, flooding it, when to flood, what it provides, which it provides tremendous amount of food base. Acorns are really, really good. And then the leaf litter supports a whole different variety of invertebrates. And it's really important. And there's more and more research all the time coming out on bottomland hardwoods and when to flood and how long to flood and how deep to flood, what you need to look for before you flood, soil temperatures, and some other things. But hopefully we can provide an episode on that. But that's another component that is really important food base. It's primarily mallards and wood ducks, but it's an important piece as we look up and down the flyway.
So talk a little bit about, we talked about the diversity of species there for a minute. So talk about the difference that I might see in if we said we have a flooded agricultural field that's, let's say, a flooded cornfield, and then we have a field of moist soil. Talk about what are the differences that I'm going to see even in the same time period. Let's say it's a time period where they would use both. Like,
Mhm.
what's the difference? How are the birds going to use it differently? Because certainly some of the other ducks will eat corn. It's just not as maybe preferred, I guess. So
Right. Certainly, moist soil versus corn. I mean, you're going to have a lot of crossover. Birds are going to eat some of both or a lot of both, depending on the situations. But some of the birds, widgeon is a good example. They tend to be a little bit more of a grazer than a lot of the other birds, and so they're probably not going to be as readily available in the cornfields as you might find mallards and green wings and pintail. Gadwall tend to be a little more aquatic vegetation oriented than some of the other ones, and so they're going to be out and about and you'll find them mixed in those other spots. It's not like they don't go there, they don't use it. They're looking for some other stuff sometimes. And so you're going to see a diversity of species in one area versus another area quite potentially. And yeah, that again, just the diversity of food is going to help you keep all those different birds a little bit more happy and certainly when and how you time the water management on those food resources.
I'm going to just share a little bit of I'm going to call it direct connect in talking about corn and moist soil habitat. So, and I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit. This is so in the springtime, birds are getting ready to lay eggs and they're molting, and there's a lot of things going on. So moist soil, the diversity of that food base that you guys are out there trying to provide and that you're thinking about providing because you're listening to what we're talking about and maybe you're reading up on it and trying to study it. But invertebrates are tied to these moist soil units. They're tied to leaf litter. They're a tremendously important food base for waterfowl, from the green winged teal all the way through mallards, everything in between. And the protein that they provide, these invertebrates, small insect and animal larvae that hatch from the soil, the protein's off the charts. I mean, it's off the charts. That is one reason, a standalone reason to make sure you have that moist soil habitat out there. That diversity of moist soil plants provides a tremendous amount of protein, the seeds, the invertebrates associated with it. It's important to kind of think through that. Corn, yeah, it has high energy, and that's great, but it is so limited on what it provides. And really, my experience has been, I mean, I like Michael said, I mean, I've harvested green wings in cornfields and green wing teal. I've harvested mallards, pintail, and so forth. But mostly mallards. That's kind of what you're keying in on. But why would you limit yourself? Because corn is limited on what it does provide. It's important for a small period of time while these other diverse plant types and this diverse moist soil vegetation is much more from beginning to end and multiple species across the board. So but that's kind of my direct connect on corn versus moist soil, protein, nutrition, invertebrates versus in corn stubble, no invertebrates essentially. So anyway, just think about it as you're managing your wetland.
No, I couldn't agree more. I've hunted with people before that have said, yeah, I don't want to shoot those little ducks. Just give me mallards. And it's like, I don't know, if we have a slow morning, you're going to be really happy when a group of teal come by or something else. So it's like, I would
Um,
much rather hunt a
yeah.
place. Yeah, I don't care if it's, whatever. I'm not going to say I want 6 shovelers, but 3 would be nice, something like that. So, but anyway, I guess that's what the point is though, is it's like, we're all habitat people. We all want water on the landscape, number one, whether there's nothing on it or not, anything on it for them to eat or not, water on the landscape's a good thing. And so, if that is a cornfield because of the way that, you need that for your income and you get to hunt on that, great. We're not hating on you at all for doing
No,
that.
not at all.
But there are opportunities to expand maybe some of the birds that you harvest, increase the daily bag limit because you added in a little bit of some of these other food sources that are probably already begging to grow in that soil. You just need to maybe not spray it, and you'll probably get all of them to come up right there, and then you'll have some of those extra birds. I think I would rather have a diverse hunt anyway than I would just shoot 4 mallards. Now, again, we might get a lot of hate for that. I don't know, but that's me. So
That's fun too.
We've talked about that a little bit before in terms of the I'm trying to remember back where I was talking about on the mallard use in the corn versus all the moist soil use and all that stuff. It's all seasonally based still. Again, I think I want to go back kind of that original point of if you're trying to provide for as many birds as you can, then you're going to be better off with that diversity of foods because when those birds get here in the fall, they're not looking for the corn. They're looking for, Danny mentioned, the protein that the bugs are producing. Just as a reference, invertebrates are producing up to 50% protein or more, 70% protein for the birds. And when they're going through molts, that's hugely important. In the spring, it's also hugely important. So again, timing those diversity of habitats with those seasonal events that are going on will help you right through this whole process. And again, looking at corn because everybody likes to talk about it, and we all know it has a good value in a good place. But again, what's it providing? It's providing that high energy, high carbohydrate diet that those birds need in those really cold days. It's not 10 degrees every day through December in the middle of the Mississippi Flyway. I mean, it varies, it fluctuates up and down. So when you get some of those 40-degree, 50-degree days, then birds readily move right back into a lot of that moist soil. And the other thing too, and we talk about this some, I think one of the reasons corn is so key is because if you look at it on a per acre basis, corn can easily produce 6,000 pounds of food per acre. Some of your best moist soil may only produce 2,500 pounds, and that's really good moist soil per acre. And so, it takes 2, 3, 4 acres of good moist soil to equal a good acre of corn, but it also costs a whole lot more to produce that acre of corn than it does an acre of moist soil. And so again, just balance it out. There's going to be natural opportunities for that as well. There's going to be places in if you're not in a strictly ag environment, I guess I should say, there'll be places where you can incorporate some low-lying area spots that typically might drown out in your field. Then those could be places where you put moist soil, and you'll start trying some of those things. I know Danny's talked about that several times. You'll produce 20% of moist soil habitat on your property next year, and just kind of build into it. And I think it'll really provide some big dividends for you, and the big thing is it provides for the birds. And ultimately, if we take care of the birds, they're going to take care of us.
No, that's a great point, Michael. And when you think about corn, yeah, it's an efficient way to feed the birds when they want it, when they need it. It's predominantly going to be mallards, at least where we're at, Missouri. It does not provide the nutritional diversity that these other plants provide. It does not provide any invertebrate substrate for that production to happen. So it's very limited on what it can do. But if that's what you can provide, like Michael said, we're not trying to make any judgments here at all. So if that's what you got, that's what you can afford to do, is provide some flooded corn, and that's awesome, great. And like Cale said, we love to see that water on the landscape and provide some of that nutrition. Do what you can, but just know that food diversity, the diverse piece that we're talking about, provides that nutritional base that's going to produce eggs in the prairie pothole country.
Awesome. I don't know how we could sum that up any better. You guys crushed that one. So moving on to kind of another thing that we were talking about earlier. When I think of moist soil and I think of food diversity, really I'm thinking of, your corn, rice, acorns, and then, the moist soil component of smartweed, millet, and that's pretty much what you talk about, right? So what else is out there as a food source that, I'm not thinking about?
Well, I know Danny's got a whole list of them. I'll just throw out real quick one we had a discussion about before we came on the air here, and it's one that we talk about a fair amount actually, and it's prevalent in most wetlands at some level. It doesn't necessarily develop dominant pure stands like some of the other moist soil communities will, but it's yellow nut sedge, and it's also commonly referred to as chufa. And I've always known it's a good food source for waterfowl. It's a good food source for turkeys. I know they use the cultivated variety of chufa that they plant in a lot of food plots for turkey and stuff in the south parts of the country, and can produce a lot of pounds per acre, can get up in that 2,500 pounds per acre on the tubers. It's like a little nutlet that it produces. It's really high carb content. And as if you look at it on the nutritional values across the board of all the moist soil plants and the natural foods and the hot foods as well, it really peaks out on some of the things it provides, like metabolizable energy is one of the, if not the highest, one of the highest ones that we routinely talk about. And so that's an important factor. But almost across the board, it falls at least in the middle of everything else that it provides when you compare it to other plants. So it is a really nice plant to have. Don't want to deter it. If you can grow it, it's going to be very productive for you. And I've seen some good use in it at times. I think that's one of the ones that when you get into a good stand of, if you come back across that spot in the spring with your tractor when it's dry, that's one of those spots that you might bounce out of the tractor seat because the birds get down there rooting for those tubers once they find it. And it turns it into just pothole after pothole, like little 1, 2 foot holes in the ground, 6 inches deep all over the place. Kind of looks like a moonscape when you look at it when it's dry.
So and I've seen birds do that, Michael, just what you're talking about. I mean, just getting in there like a bunch of hogs and just rooting that stuff up after those nutlets. So think about this list. I mean, you don't think about these plants as something that you would think important for waterfowl, but so panic grass, we've already talked smartweed and wild millet. Kale identified those, but crabgrass and grass, strangletop, shoot cup, variety of sedges, yellow nut sedge being a real important one. So here's another direct connect. Prairie crabgrass is higher in protein than corn. Now that's not as efficient, because it's smaller seed and all that, but if you just take the seed itself, it's higher in protein than what corn is. And so is fall panicum. The beggar ticks that stick on your waders that you hate when you're wading through the marsh, those are higher in protein, and ducks love them, especially mallards. I've seen that or witnessed that on a conservation area I managed, and they were doing some research, and this mallards were just stuffed full of it, and they're getting a lot of protein out of it. So if you have 7 to 10 different types of plants, that's a pretty good diverse system in a moist soil unit. If you have anything higher than that, it's awesome as long as they're desirables. But 7 to 10, if that's what you've got out there, and then you've got your corn, that's a pretty good. That's a setup. And but those are some of the species that you might not think about that are very desirable.
I think, we've talked about it several times too on how do you develop that habitat that provides that. And I think, through some of our drawdown talks that we've done before and stuff, you probably get a pretty good idea. But there's a lot of things, that tend to favor certain drawdowns. Like the smartweeds tend to favor more of the earlier drawdown periods, and the millets and some of the grasses start coming in more of the middle and later drawdown periods. And a lot of the sedges will fall in there with the grasses and kind of in between. And so again, it's kind of like the diversity of food that we want to see. If you want that, you need to probably think about your drawdowns and how you're doing those, so you can try to help hedge your bets at least to get the best response that you can. And so go back and look at some of those. Feel free, if somebody's on here listening to this and want to submit questions about how they might manage their property to get some of that stuff, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to talk to them and try to help them with that as well.
Absolutely, yeah, that's key, and how you draw your water down and try to promote and these desirable plants.
So if anybody out there has duck hunted for any length of time, you've probably hunted a time period where it's later in the year wherever you are, and it warms up a little bit. You have a really great hunt in moist soil. And so talk about that. Is that ducks adapting to what they need that quickly? Because hey, maybe they were in a cornfield for a while and then it got warm again, so maybe we don't need as much of the corn and we're moving back to another thing. Is that what's going on there? What could be going on there in those instances?
Yeah, my thought on that is anytime you get major weather changes in, say, during the hunting season, in particular, the fall, winter months, whatever those birds are doing before they went into that time period, you can almost bet money they're not going to be doing the same thing when they come out of it. So if they were heavy in the moist soil before it got cold, maybe had some ice, they moved to some more hard food, some quick, easy access corn or rice or acorns, wherever they might have been, that they could get that quick, easy food. They're probably going to stay with that for a little while, even when it warms up. But at some point, they're not going to forget what they were getting out in some of these other units. They're going to bail back into some of those more open units. And as it warms up, they're for one, they just don't have to feed as hard. They don't have to eat all the hot foods in order to stay energetically happy, I guess you would call it. And so they can loaf around a little bit. And when they get out loafing around, they're going to probably be out in some of these moist soil units, just kind of messing around, and they'll eventually adapt right back into that where that's providing what they want.
Yeah, I've seen that actually in just a scenario that I was working with a landowner, and I saw this southwest wind coming. The ice wasn't that thick, but it started to kind of melt and disappear, and you start seeing sheet water. And mostly what he had was a moist soil unit. He enjoyed it, and I said, why don't you go out there and see what's going to happen? Because these birds could be floating back here a little bit. And it had to have been in December. So he did that. And sure enough, they were coming back, but they were coming to the moist soil unit. Now, I didn't see them transition from corn to moist soil, but it was late in the year, and they came back and they came to the moist soil. He had a fantastic, I think, 2-day hunt because of it. So, like you said, Michael, at some point those birds were heavy into corn. They were eating, they were building up with that ice and all that stuff. But when it moderated, then they went back to the moist soil.
And I think some of that just kind of becomes that natural tendency to, ducks like to spend a little time eating and do a little bit of loafing the rest of the day. You see them out on those nicer days when you get those post kind of cold snaps, and you'll see them out loafing around, sitting on tops of your levees and just, basking on logs or whatever else it might be, just places they can get out of the water and kind of stand out there and enjoy life for a little bit again and not be freezing to death, not being forced to feed quite so heavily.
Also seen it the other way, where you're hunting moist soil units, mostly moist soil, you're having great hunts. And then all of a sudden, weather's starting to change. It's getting colder. I mean, we've switched from hunting moist soil habitat to hunting just little pockets of water with ice in standing corn, and putting out goose decoys and watching the birds transition and come right to you. I mean, they're not even working moist soil. They're looking at potentially what's happening in the corn because that's what they need at that time. And so that's a good time to be out there too.
So, Danny, since you just came back from the Manning Passing Academy, I'm going to, ask you this question and put this on you. And as we start to wind it down here, the question that I guess I would have, would you compare this to an athlete, right? A lot of times you need high energy right before the game, but you need a lot of other things, leading up to that.
Yeah, so to build muscle, you've got to have I mean, you got to have a lot of protein, but you've got to have carbs. You've got to have several different types of nutritional requirements to build those muscles, to build those energy reserves, to get bigger, stronger, and faster. So, absolutely, for this is kind of the athletic model that we're talking about on a duck. Because we got to build those energy reserves, we got to build the nutrition, and we got to do it all the way through the life cycle, all the way through the year. You got to focus on nutrition because that's really where it's at. And so yeah, to the short answer is absolutely it's a lot alike.
I think you hit it right on the nose too, Danny, with that the event being the life cycles. That duck, that's the event he's prepping up for, is the life cycle events he's going through. So yeah, his game is not going out and trying to necessarily beat or win anything else necessarily, but he's trying to survive. And so that's the event. It's the life cycles. I think I'll kind of wrap back up kind of where I started, I think, actually, because I think that's really important. We have people hopefully all across the country listening to some of these podcasts or our membership. And I think it's just important to know where you're at and how you fit into the life cycles of the waterfowl that come through your area. Or if you're in the north and you're providing nesting habitat, or if you're in the south and you're providing the wintering habitat, that'll help you make food choices and what you need to provide those birds as much of as possible based on where you're at. And so, for us, we fall in the middle of the migration and to some extent some wintering habitat in our part of the world, depending on how cold it'll get in the fall and winter. A lot of those birds are wanting to stay, in Missouri, and if they can. If they do go south, there seems to be a fair amount on those warm up days. You get a fair amount of movement back and forth. So again, put yourself on the map. Where are you? What are you providing? What are the ducks doing when they're there? What kind of events are they going through? And try to tailor your food management a little bit to help meet the needs that duck has when he's there. And certainly, above all, look at your own desires and interests as a land manager or wetland manager, and make sure what you're doing meets what you want it to be as well.
And I think one last comment from me is we have some awesome scientists that have done a lot of research on waterfowl and nutrition and food and what it provides. And we're going to make sure and provide that reference material to you. So you need to make sure and pay attention to it and try to get these handbook articles and information, because these folks have really studied it and they've done a great job with it. And I'm going to just leave it at that, and then we'll make that reference to make everybody know, aware of who that research, who authored the research.
Yeah, and I guess to end this, I'll just kind of say, it's my hope that if you're listening to this, it's that you care a lot about ducks, and so there's a heck of a lot more that ducks need than a cornfield, and so we want to make sure that we provide to 'em everything that entails all the way start to finish. And if you can do that on your property, all the better, because you'll reap the benefits of getting to go observe them when they're at their prettiest in the wintertime in the spring, and then also right in the fall when they first show up. So anyway, food diversity, we consider it one of the pillars of a great wetland, having a large amount of different opportunities for those ducks to go out and eat different things. And so if you're not seeing what you want on your property, it's a place to look for sure. So I guess with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And thanks for listening. If you like what you're doing, go ahead and support us. Go join BMA and get all the different materials that we have in there already pre-built. So a lot of these things we talked about are in there in various degrees and of detail. So yeah, we're excited to be able to do it, and we'll see you on the next one.